We've moved into halfway through, I'm presuming, or more, through our second episode of Star Trek Adventures. And to recap, we've played a pilot, and then we've played episode 1. And those were a total of 8 episodes, and we've played total of 8 sessions. See? Now we have played 10 sessions total, so we are 2 sessions of play into our second named episode, which as of now, recently, Anthony has told us, is called Court of Opinion. And so, let's see, it was the nature of threat for the pilot and questions of duty for the first episode, and now Court of Opinion. The little preposition of seems popular. With this episode, having driven into it a bit, and also having now seen Anthony's revelation of his preparation video for the first episode, because we're not going to see that equivalent for this episode until after it's done. But I can kind of do a little leapfrogging and say, okay, I've played in episode 1 all the way through and looked at the reflections, as they have appeared along the way. And then when it's all said and done, then we go back and we learn what Anthony was thinking when he prepped it. Rather than go way into Dimension X and then reflect upon that and then get replies about that, well, you can see, this proliferates fast. So I'm not really doing that. Now I'm looking at these 2 sessions and having not seen the preparation video for it yet. It's not available. What now am I reflecting about? Reflection point number 1 is real easy about one's character. We did the follow-up, the transition or kind of advancement, improvement, assessment phase for the characters. And one of the things I kind of liked about it in this case is that I rolled well. So it's hard to assess or, am I even in the position of assessing this system? Is this good because of this thing? Lots of YouTubing about that kind of stuff. And I frankly don't like it. So that's not really where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is more of how did I like it? How did it go for me and for my character, Korsakov? And in some ways, I rolled super well. And that means that, of course, I'm thrilled. News at 11. So I'm interested in the risk of what I was facing. There's the whole set of sequences of yes/no questions about the mission and how your character performed relative to the mission and to the directives, I guess is the right word. There's your ship's mission, there's ship's directives that are sort of intrinsic to your show. And then there's the mission directives, which is basically what you've been handed situationally. And so you assess, how your character did relative to those things. There's one part that we haven't seen in play where you actually challenge them in play. It's a formal usage of the directive in some fashion. And it can either be positive or negative, but anyway, it's a rule and we haven't seen that in place. So we just have to skip that question. It makes me kind of, oh, look, there's a toggle over there. And so that's that. Then there's the second set of questions, which are more personal, I think. Oh, wait, no. The first ones are kind of like, did you do all these good things, which are sort of like all the directives and missions and how well did you perform? Did you distinguish yourself? This kind of stuff. And then there's the things like, okay, so what about all the naughty things you've done? Did you do this? Did you do that? And, did you kill somebody gratuitously? Starfleet doesn't like that. There's a bunch of those. So anyways, I ended up getting, a few yeses and a couple of yeses, if not a whole bag full, at least a minor handful of the second bunch, which I'm perfectly happy with in terms of role playing. And so the neat thing, therefore, is that I was looking at a 50% or higher chance of getting a reprimand. I ended up coming off with, I believe, did I even get a commendation? I might have zeroed out at the commendation. I'm not sure if I got the one or not, but I ended up, doing fine. I got to where there's a threshold at which you can rearrange some of your numbers. This game really isn't about, bulking up your numbers, but you can rearrange some of them, which in my case actually was a good thing. There's a thing that I wanted to be allowed to flip, and I did. So anyways, pound for pound, we don't go into this episode with Korsakov having, weathered, negative scrutiny, which is kind of good in an episode called Court of Opinion, as it turns out. So given all the discussions that we've been having, and I could reflect on the way some of those sort of underwent weird twists and turns, inside individuals' heads. But the important, real big question that has come up, and it isn't really a question, it's just, I think Anthony is playing with it as he should be, which is this whole business of, the mechanic of threat, how it comes into play and when he applies it to specific things, and the extent of preparation before play happens. In this particular case, nothing is happening. Well, allegedly. Our ship has docked at a space station. There's some diplomatic and Starfleet-y stuff going on, some of which is just looking at some of the unavoidable consequences, things you cannot, just blow past from previous play, the most significant, most obvious of which is, Korsakov's, dismayingly, injured leg. And it was kind of nice to start off with looking at that in the first session of this episode. Something I mentioned that I really like. I mentioned it during play of the last episode, which was a session. Did it again. Which is that I'm thinking about television of 1970 and thinking about disabled characters and the fact that Korsakov is, quite a badass. I mean, he's good with the phasers on shipboard. He's good with a handheld phaser. He's good with punching you. And he's a forceful personality. His values are nuanced, which makes it, more fun to play him if a little broad for, if a little broad in perspective perhaps for a TV character, but still he's nuanced. And so, as I say, he's Russian, he's complicated, but when the decision is made, he has no compunctions about solidly nailing it with whatever comes to hand. So now you see, at this point in TV television, a disabled character was coded, immediately as a cerebral character. And this is at the time why Daredevil in comics was unheard of. We didn't have all of this manga and movies. Some of them were actually being made as far back then in Japan, I think, but like The Blind Swordsman and stuff like that kind of thing just wasn't in American popular culture at all. Disabled meant physically out of the picture. You now have to be brain person, and we're done. That's how it is. So to have a character who not only is a considerable, badass, but now has, and we have specified, this is not a cyber leg, right? This is not, a super leg. It is a prosthetic. And he is a person who lacks a leg and has a prosthetic replacement. And its extent, I mean, given the science fiction, Anthony has said it will do what a leg does. So we're not going to sort of make you, have you don't have a peg leg. You have, a replacement leg that will do it. But we all recognize that it isn't a super leg, and also that the field is open for this or that going wrong with it, and that's perfectly understandable. I am rather liking, I've introduced into play, the physical therapy side of this, and introduced into play the fact that it's going to take some getting used to. It's going to, you've seen this in later media, mainly stuff like after 2000 or so, really, that a character who gets some kind of replacement, and it's not magic and it's not like cyber robotic or anything, has kind of a getting used to side to it. It takes work and adjustment of your behavior and adjustment of your movements and all sorts of things just to work out how you're going to continue to use this. And I'm kind of enjoying that. But of course, maintaining that Korsakov is, since it is, an adequate replacement, that he is going to be able to do the things that we've seen him do. So I kind of like that. It's just imagining this as 70s television makes me feel good that this would be considered at that time well ahead of the curve and would, bring in considerable, audience surprise, or, wow, I haven't seen that before. And rather like that. So it's not a sop to existing standards and values that are out there that are expecting such a thing, or, ready to praise us for such a thing. I mean, it would be a surprise. I kind of like that a lot, in fact. So all that stated, we can look at the episode itself as it's developing. And as I said, the notion of a looming, external threat that, Anthony has brought in, or a pre-existing, very complicated, layered backstory. We're going to find the butler, sprawled in a puddle of his blood, or, a dancing girl sprawled in a puddle of her blood. And then we have to figure, this out. And, oh no, it's Scotty, or whatever. None of that. So we begin to play, and he takes us through some things that are perfectly reasonable things for us to deal with that are coming straight out of play. We've got some concerns, about the former captain of the Avicenna, whom we've seen in a flashback, and it's tied up to the alien artifact that's on my character sheet and things like that. We are looking at the presence of Ensign Yang's, family on this space station, and he's got all this problematic hoo-ha in his backstory, that he wrote up. And so these are things that are on the sheets, and they're not being brought in directly as menaces or, immediate crises for our characters. But as we move into the interactions with these things, roles are called for. Those roles may introduce complications and threat. So therefore, Anthony's in the position of saying, since there's no mandate for a rolled complication or threat to be coming immediately out of the fiction of this conflict, I am going to do that. I'm going to use, if I had my, Gorn ships coming into attack all planned, then all those threats and complications could just, that are rolled while we do things, just get, transferred over there to make them tougher. I could do that, but I don't have one. So what we get to see is those things in our backstories and from the previous sessions of play themselves get their potential as conflict take shape. And as I've said before, the fact that Anthony's doing this in large part during play really isn't a thing. That's not an important point. He could have done it before play for some other role-playing game, calling that preparation. He looks at what happens. And he goes, ooh, this, that, and the other. Those are going to be things. So I'll bring them in as, as bangs, basically, during play. You could do that. Or you could do this process, which is just a little bit more, the player rolls complications and takes no threat. So, all right, well, I'm going to look at this situation. I'm going to complicate what we've got there, which was going to make things more difficult in dealing with it and aspects of it or consequences of it. Or the player may have taken a buttload of threat, and then Anthony's like, oh, well, this thing that they're coping with, it's got dangers in it. It's got, genuine threat coming in as a consequence or as a revelation about this. And so just to be, just as an example, let's say that nobody took any threat at all about dealing with Captain Anders. And then that could be interpreted, and I'm not saying I totally know Anthony's mind on this, but it could be interpreted through the course of developing the episode that really the alien artifact and all the other people it affected, well, they had an effect at the time, and it was scary. So Telek probably was justified in, relieving him of command. But you know what? They've passed all the evaluations. They've passed all the tests, and now they're bucking for reinstatement. And you know what? They're fine. There isn't any threat about them. Nobody did anything with rolling about them in a way that took more threat. So they're fine. It's all just about whether we want them back or not, or whether we're going to, protest about that. But Anthony, I'm again sort of speaking about a hypothetical Anthony at the moment, could have been saying, should that be the case? God, as I really float off into hypothesis now, aren't I? Well, anyway, this made-up Anthony in this made-up sequence of play that we didn't do, where he is looking at no threat coming out of roles that pertain to this particular situation, basically is left with a non-threatening context for these roles, and that is okay. That is all right. It may have become more complicated too, through the course of that. It may be harder for us to get what we say we want through the course of future roles because of complications. Maybe so. So then we look at Ensign Yang's situation, and he has a number of performance-based, tasks that he has to do, and how are the roles going to go in that, and what are they going to turn into? How much threat is KC going to get into play through his management of the roles and stuff like that? The fact that both of us get to play supporting characters during this time really booms this because two reasons. One, that's more people rolling, so that's more complications and threat possibilities. Two, we are moving into the point where we are playing supporting and main characters who have meaningful dialogue, who care about specific things. They have opinions about the backstories. We have, Anya Smith being present and working with Ensign Yang. They both worked really hard on working with those cadets, and it didn't go well. The exercise went fine, but the way that they came off as instructors, and how well that factored into privilege and power in the echelons of Starfleet, which Anthony is turning up, I noticed. He seems to have taken our collective conversations about, just is Starfleet this paragon of humanity, or is it basically a human institution like any other, much as the original show, I think, strongly implies. Well, he seems to have gone off to, as soon as he's handed some complication and threat about that, he has gone off to the races. And we are seeing that Starfleet is riddled with, really pretty crass nepotism and with careerism, that would be familiar to anyone living in the real world. So that's going on. And then over to go kind of back to the Korsakov-ish situation, we see a bunch of stuff. One, threat booms. And Casey and I are both like, Anthony, he says he wants threat. Threat. Zoosh, that's been kind of, we're happy with that. And so what that means is that the alien artifact has turned Captain Anders and everybody who's been affected by it, into a menace, pretty much in a Village of the Damned situation now. And as we discovered, at the end of the episode, he gets to sort of express the threat, that we've accumulated, and we're, as viewers, because this is not available to our characters, as viewers, we're going, oh no, we are screwed, which is exactly where you want to be at the mid to just past midpoint of the episode. I'm good. So the real crowning thing for that second session of episode 2, one of the reasons why I'm doing this reflection at this midpoint instead of waiting until the whole episode is over, is to celebrate the interactions of Mbuto as played by KC and Korsakov as played by me, because honestly, as a player, I really found myself rattled by that ethical debate. Where are our loyalties? Where are our values? Korsakov is like, this has got to be about doing the right thing. We've been keeping this artifact secret. These people may be, becoming menaces. I'm really scared of, Captain Anders. This is even before we as viewers had known, just how squirrely they've become. So I'm just like guessing, really. And Korsakov is just guessing, saying, we just don't know. Do you really want him back? And it turns out that wasn't the thing. Mbuto agreed with me, this is a bad idea. But he's all about keeping this artifact secret because he doesn't want, given the backstory that we've learned, he doesn't want Telek to get into trouble. Telek is, has been thrown into this position of commanding officer and is a Vulcan, which is in our game, in our show, is not normal. Spock is not normal in the Federation. And for this to have occurred, as a plot point, the immediate backstory of the show is like fraught. So there we are, debating, do we come clean about this? During episode 1, Mbuto, as played by our third player at the time, had said no. So Casey's honoring that. He's saying, I'm playing the guy who said no. And he comes up with an understanding of why that just makes Mbuto just blossom. It's all about understanding Vulcans as a potentially disrespected minority. And it is just rocked me back on my heels as a player. I'm like, damn, this guy has a point. Okay, so where is Korsakov coming from with his whole, truth shall out, we do the right thing. What is the right thing? And so we basically had this very in-character dialogue, very heartfelt, that we kind of looked at each other and like, we're going to the dice. We don't know who's making the better argument here. I mean, I certainly didn't. And Korsakov wins like a champ. And before that conversation, I would have been like, I know I'm right. Mbuto's just being a butt. And so I just really hope the dice don't, make me cave, to this position that I'm not very sympathetic to. And then after this, role playing through where our characters are coming from and how we feel about this, as players in terms of playing these characters, and knowing that actually, these dice could go any which way, and we're good with how they go because that's how the dialogue went. And so then we move into the revelations about this coming up in a little while. So it's been, really a joy finally to see, the characters stand up, and people could say, hypothetically a viewer, but me as in sort of viewer mind says, now I'm seeing what this show is about. Now I'm seeing the travails of people who are in a ship like the Avicenna, and the kind of situations that they've been landed with, the kind of pressures that they have to operate under, and the kind of difficulties they have in coping with, effectively the chain of command and the administrative narrative of what should be happening out there and how people should be behaving. Really liking, the ongoing kind of non-specific but always pointed, applicable, critique that we achieve by that, which is something that I value greatly in the original Star Trek, and I'm really enjoying it here.